She was scrubbing floors at midnight when the most dangerous man in the city walked out of the elevator. He had a proposal that would change everything, but accepting it meant stepping into a world she didn't understand. What she didn't know was that saying yes would lead to something she never saw coming. This story proves that family isn't always about blood, it's about who shows up and stays. Subscribe for more emotional journeys that remind us what really matters, and let me know in the comments what you thought of Aliyah and Jibiam's story. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Aliyah wiped down the last conference table, her back aching from 12 hours of cleaning offices in the financial district. Her son Albert sat cross-legged in the corner, his noise-canceling headphones on, organizing paper clips by color, something that calmed him when the world got too loud. "Mama, 17 blue ones now," he said without looking up, his voice soft but certain. "That's really good, baby." Aliyah smiled despite her exhaustion. Bringing him to work wasn't ideal, but the babysitter had canceled last minute, and she couldn't afford to miss another shift. Single motherhood meant making impossible choices feel normal. She was reaching for her cleaning cart when the elevator dinged. Her supervisor never came up this late. Aliyah turned, expecting maybe a security guard, but instead, a man stepped out. Not just any man. He wore a charcoal suit that is way too expensive even by mere looking, his dark hair pushed back, his expression unreadable. Korean, maybe in his mid-30s, with the kind of face that made you look twice. But it wasn't his looks that made her freeze. It was the way 3 other men flanked him, all silent, all watching. "You're the cleaning staff," he said. "Not a question." "Yes, sir. I'm almost done, I need to speak with you." His English was perfect, barely accented. Privately. Aliyah's heart kicked up. She'd heard stories about this building, whispers among the other cleaners about the top floor, about the businesses that operated in shadows. She glanced at Albert, who was still absorbed in his paper clips, and something protective flared in her chest. "My son's right there, so whatever you need to say, you can say it here." The man's gaze shifted to Albert, and for a moment, something flickered across his face. Not annoyance. Something softer, almost sad. "Your son. He's how old?"
8.
"Look, if there's a complaint about my work." "No complaint." He stepped closer, and Aliyah noticed he moved differently than most men, quiet, deliberate, like someone used to being obeyed. "I'm Hanjail Jibiam. I own this building. And several others." Aliyah's stomach dropped. She'd cleaned these offices for 2 years and never once met the owner. Why now? Why her? "I've been watching you," he continued, and okay, that should have sounded creepy, but his tone was matter-of-fact. "Every night for 3 weeks. You bring your son. You never miss a spot. You stay late even when you're not required to. I do my job." "You do more than your job." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I have a proposal for you." The 3 men behind him shifted slightly, and Aliyah realized they weren't just assistants. They were guards. Protection. Which meant Hanjail Jibiam was exactly the kind of man the whispers warned about. What kind of proposal? She kept her voice steady, but her mind was racing through exit strategies. "I need someone I can trust. Someone who doesn't ask questions. Someone who..." He glanced at Albert again. "Someone who understands what it means to protect what matters most." "I don't understand." "You will." He reached into his jacket, Aliyah tensed, but he only pulled out a business card. Simple, expensive-looking paper with embossed lettering. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Come to this address. Bring your son if you need to. I'll explain everything then. And if I don't come?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Respect, maybe. Then you don't come. But I think you will. Because whatever I'm offering, it's better than this." He gestured around the empty office, at her worn-out sneakers, at the life she was barely holding together. Before she could respond, he was gone.
Just like that.
The elevator doors closed, and Aliyah was left standing there with a business card burning in her palm. "Mama?" Albert looked up finally, his dark eyes wide. "Who was that man?" "I don't know, baby." But that was a lie. She knew exactly what kind of man Hanjail Jibiam was. The kind who didn't make offers, he made deals. And somehow, without understanding why, she knew she'd be at that address tomorrow. Because he was right. This life, this endless cycle of exhaustion and barely scraping by, it wasn't enough anymore. The address led to a restaurant in the business district's quieter edge. Not flashy, but the kind of place where you needed a reservation months in advance. Aliyah had looked it up last night on her phone, her stomach twisting with anxiety. She'd dressed in her only good blouse, had made sure Albert wore his favorite blue shirt, the one without tags that didn't bother his skin. They stood outside the entrance at 9:58 a.m., and Aliyah was about to turn around, to forget this whole thing, when the door opened. A woman, older, with kind eyes, gestured them inside. "Mr. Gibeon is expecting you." The restaurant was empty. Completely empty. Just one table set up near the windows, where Hanjail sat reading something on his phone. He stood when he saw them. "You came. You knew I would." Aliyah kept her hand on Albert's shoulder. Her son was already overwhelmed. She could tell by the way he was breathing faster, his fingers tapping against his leg. "Does he like quieter spaces?" Hanjail asked, his attention fully on Albert. "There's a room in the back. Books, puzzles. No noise." How did he know? Aliyah felt her defenses crack just slightly. "Albert, baby, do you want to?" "Puzzles," Albert said immediately. He didn't like new people, but he loved puzzles. The kind woman from before appeared again, extending a hand to Albert. "I have a 1,000-piece one. Ocean animals." Albert looked at Aliyah for permission. She nodded, watched him go, then turned back to Hanjail with her arms crossed.
"All right.
I'm here. What do you want?" He gestured to the chair across from him.
Sit."
"Please." She sat, but barely, perched on the edge like she might bolt any second. "I need someone to manage a property for me," Hanjail started. "A residential building. Uptown. 40 units. I clean offices. I'm not a property manager." "You could be." He slid a folder across the table. "The previous manager had to leave suddenly. I need someone honest. Someone who won't steal from me or cut corners. Someone who needs this enough to do it right." Aliyah opened the folder. The salary listed made her breath stop. It was triple what she made now. Triple. Why me? You could hire someone with actual experience. Experience can be taught. Character can't. He leaned back, studying her. "You work 3 jobs. You bring your son everywhere because you can't afford reliable childcare. You've never been late, never called in sick, never complained. That tells me more than any resume. You investigated me." It should have made her angry, but mostly she felt exposed. "I did. And I know you're 2 months behind on rent. I know your car is held together by hope and duct tape. I know you wake up at 4 a.m. and don't sleep until midnight." His expression didn't change, but his voice softened just slightly. "I know you're drowning. Let me throw you a rope." "What's the catch?" Because there was always a catch with men like him. No catch. You manage the building. You collect rent, coordinate repairs, handle tenant issues. The apartment comes with the job, top floor, 3 bedrooms. And you don't ask questions about my other businesses. You see things, you forget them. People come to meet me there sometimes. You treat them like any other visitor. Nothing more. There it was. The shadows everyone whispered about. "I'm not getting involved in anything illegal. You won't be. I'm not asking you to break laws. Just maintain discretion."
He paused.
"I have enemies. People who would use any information against me. I need someone who can keep their mouth shut and their eyes forward." Aliyah thought about Albert's therapy appointments she kept canceling because insurance barely covered them. About the check engine light in her car she'd been ignoring for 6 months. About the fact that her son deserved better than sleeping on a pull-out couch in a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like mildew. "I need to think about it." "Fair enough." Hanjail stood, and Aliyah realized the meeting was over. "But while you think, consider this. That building has a child psychologist 2 floors down. She specializes in autism. I've already spoken with her. If you take the job, Albert gets sessions. fully covered. Aliyah's throat tightened. He'd thought of everything. Or maybe he'd just noticed everything, the way only someone who'd survived by paying attention could. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. For the first time, his expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something close. "Maybe I recognize someone who refuses to give up, even when they should." Before she could respond, Albert burst back into the room, holding a completed puzzle. "Mama, look, I finished it. That's amazing, baby." Hanjail crouched down to Albert's level, something Aliyah had never seen any stranger do. "You're fast. That puzzle usually takes adults hours." Albert beamed. "I like patterns. They make sense." "Me too," Hanjail said, and the way he said it made Aliyah wonder what patterns he spent his life solving.
She took the job.
What choice did she have, really? The apartment was beautiful, hardwood floors, huge windows, an actual bedroom for Albert with space for all his books and organizing systems. The building itself was in one of those neighborhoods Aliyah had only driven through before, the kind where people walked their dogs at 7 a.m. and coffee cost $7. The first week was overwhelming. Learning the computer system, meeting 40 different tenants, coordinating with maintenance workers who spoke 3 different languages. But Aliyah had never been afraid of hard work, and slowly, she found her rhythm. Albert thrived. The psychologist, Dr. Michelle Osei, was patient and brilliant. After just 2 sessions, she'd given Aliyah strategies that made bedtime less of a battle, that helped Albert communicate when he was getting overwhelmed. And Hanjail, he kept his distance mostly. He'd show up once a week, always in the evening, always with 2 or 3 of his men. They'd go to his private office on the 2nd floor, stay for an hour or 2, then leave. Aliyah didn't ask questions. She'd learned young that curiosity could be dangerous. But on a Thursday night, 3 weeks into the job, everything shifted. Aliyah was in the lobby filing maintenance requests when Hanjail came through the front entrance. Alone this time, which was unusual. And he looked different.
Tired, maybe.
There was tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. "Everything all right with the building?" he asked, stopping at her desk. "Yes, sir. Mrs. Fisher in 3B keeps complaining about her radiator, but maintenance is scheduled for tomorrow." He nodded absently, his mind clearly somewhere else. "Are you all right?" The question escaped before Aliyah could stop it. Hanjail looked surprised, like people didn't usually ask him that. "Long day. I'm making tea. If you want some." She didn't know why she offered. Maybe because he looked as worn down as she'd felt 2 months ago.
Tea would be, yes.
"Thank you." They ended up in the small office behind the lobby, Aliyah pulling out the electric kettle she'd brought from home. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was weighted with things unsaid. "Your son," Hanjail said finally. "He's doing better?" Dr. Osei mentioned he's making progress. "You talked to his therapist about him?" "I pay for it. I like to know it's helping." Aliyah handed him a mug, nothing fancy, just chamomile from a grocery store box. "He's doing really well, actually. He made a friend in the building. The kid in 5C, they both like trains." "That's good." Hanjail wrapped his hands around the mug, and Aliyah noticed faint scars on his knuckles. "Old ones. Friends are important. You say that like you don't have many." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "In my line of work, friends are complicated." "What I asked your line of work, exactly?" Aliyah knew she was pushing her luck, breaking her own rule about not asking questions. "Import, export,
Consulting.
investments." All technically true, probably. All carefully vague. Dangerous work, though. Sometimes. He met her eyes over the rim of his mug. "Does that scare you?" It should have. But sitting there in the quiet office, watching this man who'd single-handedly changed her life drink cheap tea like it was the best thing he'd tasted all day, Aliyah realized fear wasn't what she was feeling. "I grew up in Compton," she said instead. "My daddy ran numbers for a local crew. My mama cleaned houses for people who treated her like furniture. I learned young that dangerous and bad aren't always the same thing." Something shifted in Hanjail's expression. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. "Your father. Is he Died when I was 15. Wrong place, wrong time. Story old as time. She shrugged, but the pain never really faded. Mama passed 2 years later. Heart attack, but I think she just gave up after losing him. I'm sorry. Don't be. I survived. That's what we do, right? People like us? Han Giles set down his mug carefully. People like us? People who know what it's like to fight for everything. Who don't take anything for granted because it can all disappear in a second. He was quiet for a long moment, and Aliyah wondered if she'd overstepped. But then he said, "My father built our family's business from nothing. He was a fisherman in Busan who saved every coin until he could buy a small boat. Then another. Then a whole fleet. By the time I was born, we owned half the shipping routes in South Korea." That's impressive. It was. Until his competitors decided they didn't like being outpaced by a fisherman's son. They came after him. After all of us.
His jaw tightened.
I was 19 when they killed him. Made it look like an accident, but I knew better. Aliyah's chest squeezed. I'm sorry. I took over the business. Expanded it. Made sure no one could threaten us again. He looked at her directly. So yes, I understand fighting for everything. And I understand that sometimes you have to become dangerous to protect what you love. The air between them felt charged suddenly. Not uncomfortable, but intense in a way Aliyah couldn't quite name. Why are you telling me this? She asked softly. Because you asked. And because. He hesitated, something he rarely did. Because I don't have many people I can talk to honestly. Everyone either wants something from me or fears me. You do neither. I work for you. I definitely want my paycheck. He smiled, a real one this time. That's different. You work for your paycheck. You don't manipulate or scheme for it. There's a difference. Before Aliyah could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from the babysitter upstairs, Mrs. Rivera, a sweet older woman in 6A who watched Albert when Aliyah had evening tasks. Albert asking for you. Bedtime routine. I have to go, Aliyah said, standing. Albert needs me. Of course. Han Giles stood too. Thank you. For the tea. And for listening. Anytime. She meant it, weirdly enough. As she headed for the elevator, Han Giles called after her. Aliyah? She turned. You're good at this job. Better than good. I want you to know that. Warmth spread through her chest, the kind that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with being seen. Really seen, maybe for the first time in years. Thank you, she said quietly, then disappeared into the elevator. Upstairs, Albert was waiting in his pajamas, his favorite blanket clutched in one hand. Mama, Mrs. Rivera said you were working late. Just had to talk to Mr. GIBM about building stuff. Nothing exciting. I like Mr. GIBM, Albert announced, climbing into bed. He doesn't talk too loud. And he listens when I explain things. Aliyah tucked him in, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Yeah, baby. He's pretty alright. Do you like him, Mama? What kind of question is that? You smile different when you talk about him. Like how you smile when you see pictures of Grandma. Out of the mouths of babes. Aliyah kissed his forehead, dodging the question. Get some sleep, smart guy. School tomorrow. But long after Albert drifted off, Aliyah lay awake in her own room, staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about scarred knuckles and sad smiles and the way Han Giles GIBM had looked at her like she mattered. The next few weeks developed a pattern. Han Giles came by more often, always with some official reason, checking on repairs, reviewing budgets, meeting with associates. But he started staying longer, sometimes joining Aliyah in the office for tea, sometimes asking about Albert's progress. They talked, really talked, about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Busan, about his mother who made the best kimchi stew in the province, about learning English by watching American movies with subtitles. She told him about her dreams of going to college, about Albert's father who disappeared the moment he heard the word autism, about the small joys she found in her son's laugh.
It was easy.
Easier than it should have been. You ever think about doing something else? Han Giles asked one evening. They were in the building's small garden courtyard, watching Albert play with his train set on a blanket. Like what? I don't know. You're smart, organized, good with people. You could manage bigger properties. Or go back to school. Aliyah laughed softly. School's expensive. And Albert needs me present, not buried in textbooks. What if money wasn't an issue? She looked at him sharply. Don't what? Don't offer to pay for things. You've already done too much. Too much. He seemed genuinely confused. I gave you a job. That's all. You gave me a life, Aliyah corrected, her voice tighter than she intended. You gave my son a chance at normal. That's not just a job, Hanjail. That's everything. And I won't be charity. He was quiet for a moment, watching Albert line up his trains by size. Is that what you think you are? Charity. Aren't I?
No.
He turned to face her fully. You're the best decision I've made in years. This building runs smoother than it ever has. Tenants actually like their property manager. You've saved me money, time, and headaches. If anything, I'm the one getting the better deal. You don't have to say that. I don't say things I don't mean. Ask anyone who knows me. He paused. You have value, Aliyah. Not because I gave you a job, but because of who you are. I gave you a chance to show it. Damn him for saying exactly what some broken part of her needed to hear. Mama. Albert ran over, holding up his favorite blue train. Mr. GIBM, look. This is Thomas. He's number one. Number one, huh? Hanjail crouched down, examining the train seriously. That's a lot of responsibility. He handles it though, because he has friends to help him. Percy and Gordon and James. Friends are important, Hanjail agreed. Even for number one engines. Albert beamed, then ran back to his trains. You're good with him, Aliyah observed. I had a younger brother, Hanjail said quietly. He loved trains too. Had. His expression shuddered slightly.
He died.
Long time ago. He was 6. Oh God. Hanjail, I'm so sorry. It's why I noticed Albert that first night. The way he organized those paper clips, my brother used to do the same thing with his toy cars. We didn't know it then, but he probably had autism too. My parents just thought he was shy, different. Back then, in Korea, they didn't talk about those things. Aliyah reached out without thinking, placed her hand over his. I'm so sorry. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her. Something vulnerable flickered across his face. Thank you. They stayed like that for a moment, hands touching, watching Albert play, and Aliyah felt something shift between them. Something neither of them was quite ready to name. The trouble started on a rainy Tuesday in November. Aliyah was processing rent payments in the office when 2 men she'd never seen before walked into the lobby. Something about them felt wrong immediately. The way they moved, the cold assessment in their eyes. Can I help you? She kept her voice professional, but her hand drifted toward the panic button Hanjail had installed under her desk. He'd been insistent about it, and now she understood why. We're looking for GIBM Hanjail, the taller one said. His accent was thick, definitely Korean. We were told he conducts business here. Mr. GIBM owns the building, but he's not here right now. I can take a message. No message. The man stepped closer, and Aliyah's fingers found the panic button. When will he be here? I don't keep track of the owner's schedule. If you want to reach him, I can give you his office number. We want to see him. Here. Tonight. I can't guarantee. Make it happen. It wasn't a request. Aliyah pressed the panic button twice. The signal Hanjail had taught her for urgent, but not emergency. I'll see what I can do. Can I have your names? The 2 men exchanged looks. Tell him the Lee family wants to talk. He'll know what that means. They left, and Aliyah's hands were shaking as she grabbed her phone. Before she could dial, it rang. Hanjail. What's wrong? How did you? The panic button. Right. She took a breath. 2 men just came by. Said they're from the Lee family. They want to meet you here tonight. Silence. Then, did they threaten you? Not exactly. But something felt off. I'm coming now. Lock the lobby doors. Don't let anyone in until I get there. Hanjail, what's going on? Just lock the doors, Aliyah. Please. He arrived 20 minutes later with 4 of his men, all of them wearing expressions that made Aliyah's stomach twist. This was the other side of Hanjail Gibm, the one she'd been carefully not thinking about. You should go upstairs, he said, his voice different, harder, more distant. Take Albert. Stay in your apartment until I call you. I'm the property manager. If there's a meeting here, this isn't that kind of meeting. He looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, Aliyah saw something like fear in his eyes. Not for himself. For her. Please. Go upstairs. Lock your door. Don't come down no matter what you hear. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. The Lee family. He stopped, seemed to recalibrate. They're dangerous. More dangerous than me. And if they think you matter to me, they'll use that. The words hung between them. If they think you matter to me. Do I? She asked quietly. Matter to you? Hanjail's jaw tightened. More than I should have let you. Which is why you need to go. Now. Aliyah wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. She'd seen that expression before, on her father's face, the night before he died. Determination, mixed with resignation. Be careful, she whispered. Always am. She gathered Albert from Mrs. Rivera's apartment, made up some excuse about maintenance work happening downstairs. Once they were safely in their apartment, she locked the door and tried to distract her son with dinner and cartoons. But her ears were straining for sounds from below. Around 8 p.m., she heard voices. Raised voices, angry, words she couldn't make out but tones she recognized. Her phone buzzed. Stay upstairs. Everything's fine. It didn't sound fine. It sounded like the kind of danger she'd spent her whole adult life trying to escape. An hour later, another text, they're gone. You can come down if you want. Aliyah made sure Albert was asleep, asked Mrs. Rivera to listen for him, then took the elevator down. The lobby was empty except for Hanjail, sitting on one of the couches, his head in his hands. Hey, she said softly. He looked up, and she saw exhaustion etched into every line of his face. You should be upstairs. Probably. But I'm here. She sat next to him, not touching but close enough. Want to talk about it? The Leaf family thinks I'm encroaching on their territory. They want me to back off certain business ventures or they'll make things difficult. And will you? Back off. I can't. Those ventures are what keep my people safe, what pays for. He gestured vaguely around the building. All of this. If I back down now, it shows weakness. And weakness is death in my world. So, what happens next? They'll push. I'll push back. Eventually, someone will have to give. He looked at her. Which is why I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. Do you want to leave? Find another job, another place? I can set you up somewhere the Leaf family would never connect to me. Give you a reference, help with the transition. You and Albert would be safe. Aliyah's heart was pounding. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. Your safety matters. Albert's safety matters. That's not an answer. Hanjail ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd never seen from him. What I want is impossible. Because wanting you here, wanting to see you every day, wanting to watch your son grow up and succeed, that puts a target on both of you. So no matter what I want, the smart thing, the right thing, is to send you somewhere safe. Her breath caught. You want me here, Aliyah. Say it clearly. Do you want me to stay or go? He looked at her, really looked at her, and all his careful control cracked just slightly. I want you to stay. God help me, I want you to stay. Then I'm staying. You don't understand the risk. I understand perfectly. She took his hand, the one with scars on the knuckles. I understand that you're in a dangerous business. I understand that there are people who want to hurt you. I understand that being close to you makes me and Albert potential targets. I understand all of it, Hanjail. And I'm staying anyway. Why? Because somewhere between tea in the office and watching him play trains with her son, she'd fallen for him. Because he'd given her back her life and never asked for anything in return. Because when he looked at her, she felt like someone worth seeing. But she couldn't say all that. Not yet. So instead, she said, because friends don't abandon each other when things get hard. And we're friends, right? Something flickered across his face. Disappointment maybe, or relief.
Friends.
Yes. So, as your friend, I'm telling you, I'm not going anywhere. You deal with your Leaf family problem, and I'll keep managing this building. Deal? He squeezed her hand gently. You're stubborn. You're just now figuring that out? That got a small laugh from him, and the tension broke slightly. They sat there in the quiet lobby, hands still joined, and Aliyah tried not to think about how right it felt. The next few weeks were tense. Hanjail increased security around the building, added cameras, changed his routines. He came by less often, and when he did, there were always guards with him. But he also started calling her. Late at night, after Albert was asleep, her phone would ring. Can't sleep? She'd ask, settling into her favorite chair by the window. Too much on my mind. Tell me about your day. Something normal. So she would. She'd tell him about Mrs. Fisher's radiator finally getting fixed, about the couple in 4D who got a puppy, about Albert's latest obsession with space shuttles. And he'd listen, asking questions, laughing at the right moments, and slowly the tension in his voice would ease. You're good at this, he said one night. At what? Making things feel less heavy. Like maybe the world isn't quite as dark as it seems. The world's only as dark as we let it be, Aliyah said softly. There's always light somewhere. You just have to look for it. Is that what you are? My light. The question hung there, vulnerable and raw. I'm just me, Hanjail. But if being me helps, then yeah. Maybe I am. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, could almost picture him in whatever expensive apartment he lived in, probably staring out at the city lights. I'm handling the Lee situation, he said finally. It's taking longer than I'd like, but I'm handling it. I trust you. You shouldn't. You barely know me. I know enough. And she did. She knew he was dangerous and kind, ruthless and gentle, feared and lonely. She knew he carried the weight of his father's death and his brother's memory. She knew he'd built an empire and would burn it all down to protect what mattered. And God help her, she knew she was falling in love with him. The breakthrough came in early December. Hanjail showed up at the building on a Thursday afternoon, no guards, no tension in his shoulders. He actually smiled when he saw her. It's done, he said simply. The Lee family? We came to an understanding. Divided territories, agreed on boundaries. They'll leave my ventures alone. I'll stay out of their way. It's not perfect, but it's stable. Relief flooded through her. That's amazing. It means you're safe. You and Albert. They won't come after you to get to me. I was never worried. You should have been. But he was smiling, really smiling, and it transformed his whole face. Thank you. For what? For staying. For believing I could handle it. For... He paused. For being my light when everything else was dark. Aliyah's heart was doing acrobatics in her chest. You remembered that. I remember everything you tell me. He stepped closer. Aliyah, there's something I need to say. Before he could continue, Albert burst through the lobby doors with Mrs. Rivera trailing behind him. Mama, guess what? Dr. Osei said I can start regular school after winter break. She thinks I'm ready. Aliyah swept him into a hug, tears pricking her eyes. That's wonderful, baby. I'm so proud of you. Mr. Gibn. Albert turned, beaming. Did you hear? Real school. With other kids. I heard. Hanjail crouched down, his expression soft. You've worked really hard, Albert. You should be proud of yourself. I am. And Mama's proud too. And maybe we should celebrate? He looked between them hopefully. Like pizza? Or ice cream? Hanjail glanced at Aliyah, something questioning in his eyes. She nodded, her heart too full for words. Pizza and ice cream, Hanjail decided. But first, Albert, can I ask you something? Okay. Would it be alright if I took you and your mama to dinner sometime? Like a proper dinner, at a restaurant. Albert considered this seriously. Like a date? Yes. Like a date. Is that okay with you, mama? Aliyah looked at Hanjail, at this man who'd changed everything, who'd given them a life she'd never dreamed possible, who looked at her son like he mattered. Yeah, baby. That's okay with me. Albert grinned. Then yes. But can we still have pizza today? They ended up at a small pizza place 2 blocks away, the 3 of them crowded into a booth. Albert dominated the conversation, talking about school and his therapy sessions and his new friend who also liked trains. Hanjail listened with genuine interest, asking questions, laughing at Albert's jokes. And Aliyah watched them both, her heart expanding in ways she hadn't thought possible. This was what family could look like. Not perfect, not conventional, but real and warm and theirs. Later, after Albert was in bed, Aliyah stood on her apartment balcony looking out at the city. Her phone rang. Did I wake you? Hanjail asked. No. I was just thinking. About how much everything's changed. 6 months ago, I was barely surviving. Now I'm standing on a balcony in an apartment I actually love, watching my son thrive, talking to... She paused. Talking to you. Is that a good thing? The best thing. She took a breath. Hanjail, when Albert asked if you were asking us on a date. Were you? Really? Silence. Then, I've been trying to figure out how to ask you for weeks. Your son just made it easier. Why didn't you just ask me directly? Because I'm dangerous, Aliyah. My life is complicated and messy and full of things that could hurt you. I kept telling myself to stay away, to keep this professional. But then you'd smile at me or tell me about your day or just exist in my world, and I couldn't remember why staying away was so important. Aliyah's eyes burned. You think I don't know what I'm getting into? I think you're too kind to see how dark my world really is. I grew up in darkness, remember? I know what it looks like. And yeah, your world is dangerous. But you know what else it is? It's full of people who depend on you, who you protect and provide for. It's full of loyalty and honor and choices that aren't easy, but that you make anyway. That's not darkness, Hanjail. That's just life. Complicated, messy life. You see the best in everyone, don't you? I see what's there. And what I see in you, it's not perfect, but it's good. Really good. Aliyah. His voice cracked slightly. I don't deserve you. That's not your call to make. I get to decide what I deserve, and I'm deciding right now that I deserve someone who sees me, who values my son, who makes me feel like maybe the world isn't quite as hard as I thought. If that's you, then yeah, let's go on that date. She could hear him breathing, could picture his face, hope and fear warring in his expression. Saturday, he said finally. There's a restaurant I know. Quiet, good food. I'll pick you both up at 6. Both of us. Of course, both of you. Albert's part of this too. Part of us. Us. Such a small word for something so enormous. Saturday at 6. Aliyah agreed. We'll be ready. After they hung up, she stayed on the balcony for a long time, letting herself feel the full weight of what was happening. She was falling in love with a man whose life was nothing like hers, whose world came with dangers she couldn't fully understand. But he was also the man who'd given her a chance when no one else would, who treated her son with patience and kindness, who called her his light. Maybe love wasn't supposed to be safe or simple. Maybe it was supposed to be this, scary and wonderful and worth the risk. Saturday arrived with the first snow of the season. Albert was excited, bouncing around the apartment in his nicest clothes, asking every 5 minutes when Mr. GIBM would arrive. Soon, baby. Just be patient. But I'm not patient, Mama. I'm excited. Aliyah laughed, adjusting his collar one more time. She'd chosen a simple dress, nothing fancy, but it made her feel pretty in a way she hadn't in years. When the knock came at exactly 6 p.m., Albert raced to the door. Aliyah opened it to find Hanjail standing there in a dark suit, holding a small wrapped box and looking adorably nervous.
Hi, he said.
Hi yourself. Mr. GIBM. Albert grabbed his hand. It's snowing.
Did you see?
It's the first snow.
I saw.
Pretty special, huh? Really special. Mama says the first snow is magical. Hanjail glanced at Aliyah, something warm in his eyes. Your mama's right. He handed the box to Albert.
For you.
Early celebration for starting regular school. Albert tore into it, revealing a vintage model train, a blue Thomas engine, meticulously detailed.
Whoa.
This is a special edition. How did you know I wanted this? I pay attention. Hanjail smiled. You mentioned it to Dr. Osei last week. Aliyah's throat tightened. He'd been keeping track of Albert's therapy sessions, listening to what her son wanted, caring enough to remember. The restaurant was perfect, intimate without being fancy, quiet enough for Albert not to get overwhelmed. They ordered too much food, laughed at Albert's stories, and slowly the nervousness faded into something comfortable. Can I ask you something? Hanjail said later, after Albert had gone to look at the fish tank near the entrance. Anything. What made you say yes?
To this.
To me. Aliyah considered her words carefully. I spent my whole life being told I wasn't enough. Not smart enough, not successful enough, not anything enough. And then you showed up and just saw me. Really saw me. Not what I could do for you or how useful I could be, but just me. How could I say no to someone who made me feel like I mattered? Hanjail reached across the table, took her hand gently. You do matter, Aliyah. More than you know. So do you. They stayed like that, hands joined across the table, until Albert came bouncing back with stories about the fish tank. And when they left the restaurant, snow still falling softly around them, Hanjail took Aliyah's hand again. Just held it, gentle and sure, while Albert chattered about the evening. It wasn't dramatic or earth-shattering. It was just right. The months that followed were both ordinary and extraordinary. Hanjail became a regular part of their lives. Dinner twice a week, weekend outings, late-night phone calls that stretched until dawn. He was there when Albert started regular school, standing next to Aliyah outside the building with his hands in his pockets, both of them anxious as parents. He was there when Albert came home crying after a bad day, helping Aliyah talk through big feelings and bigger fears. He was there for the small moments too. Movie nights where Albert fell asleep between them on the couch, grocery shopping trips where Hanjail insisted on pushing the cart, quiet evenings where they'd just exist in each other's space. But there were complications too. Hanjail's business didn't disappear just because they were together. There were still late-night meetings, still associates coming by the building, still moments when Aliyah could see the weight of his world pressing down on him. You don't have to protect me from all of it, she told him one night. They were in her apartment, both of them on the couch while Albert slept. I'm not fragile. I know you're not, but I want to protect you anyway. Why? He turned to face her fully. Because my world took my father from me, my brother, most of the people I've ever cared about. And the thought of it touching you or Albert, it's unbearable. So what do? Live in fear forever.
No.
We're careful. We're smart. And we trust each other. I do trust you. Even knowing what I am, what I do. Aliyah took his face in her hands, made him look at her. I know exactly who you are, Hanjail Gibm. You're the man who noticed a struggling single mom and gave her a chance. You're the man who paid for my son's therapy without being asked. You're the man who calls me at 2 a.m. just because you can't sleep and want to hear my voice. That's who you are. Everything else is just noise. His eyes searched hers. How do you do that? Do what? Make everything feel simple when it's not. Because loving you is simple. Everything else might be complicated, but that part? That's easy. It was the first time either of them had said it out loud. The word hung between them, huge and terrifying and wonderful. You love me, Hanjail said quietly. Not a question.
Yeah.
I do. And before you start listing all the reasons why I shouldn't. He shut her up with a kiss. I love you too, he whispered. I've loved you for months. Maybe since that first night when you looked at me like I was just a man, not a boss or a threat or anything else. Just a man. You're just a man. A really wonderful, complicated, protective man who I happen to love. They stayed like that, wrapped around each other on the couch, and Aliyah felt something settle in her chest. This was home. Not the apartment, not the building, but this. Him and her and Albert, choosing each other despite everything. 2 months later, Hanjail showed up at the apartment with flowers and a serious expression. "We need to talk," he said, and Aliyah's stomach dropped. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. I promise. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to think about it seriously before you answer." They sat on the balcony, Albert at a friend's apartment for a playdate. The city stretched out below them, full of lights and possibilities. "I'm expanding my legitimate businesses," Hanjail started, selling off some of the Messier ventures, focusing on real estate, imports, consulting, things that won't put you and Albert at risk. "Hanjail, you don't have to. I want to. I've been building toward this for years anyway. Meeting you just gave me the push I needed to actually do it." He took her hand. "But it means changes. Big changes. It means restructuring my whole organization, stepping back from certain activities, probably making some people unhappy in the process. Can you handle that?" "I can. But I need to know, are you with me? Through all of it? The transition, the uncertainty, the backlash." Aliyah squeezed his hand. "I've been with you this whole time. Why would I stop now? Because it's going to get harder before it gets easier. People are going to push back. There will be threats, pressure, attempts to pull me back into the old ways. And I need to know you're not going to wake up one day and realize this isn't worth it. Look at me." She waited until his eyes met hers. "I grew up watching my daddy fight his whole life for scraps. I watched my mama work herself to death trying to make ends meet. I know what hard looks like, Hanjail. And this? Being with you, building a life with you, watching you choose something better? This is worth everything." He pulled her close, buried his face in her neck. "I don't deserve you. Stop saying that. We deserve each other. We deserve the happiness we're building. And we deserve a future that isn't weighed down by the past. I want to give you that future. I want to give you everything. I don't need everything. I just need you. And Albert needs you. That's enough." "Is it though?" He pulled back, looked at her seriously. "Because I want more than just being your boyfriend, or whatever we're calling this. I want us to be a family. Really a family. You, me, Albert. Maybe more kids someday if you want them. A house somewhere safe. Normal problems like homework and parent-teacher conferences. I want boring and domestic in ours." Aliyah's eyes burned. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "Not yet. Not officially. I want to do this right. Talk to Albert first, make sure he's okay with it, plan something special. But I'm telling you now, Aliyah Williams. I'm going to ask you to marry me.
Soon.
And I need to know if you'd say yes." She laughed through her tears. "You're really asking me to spoil the surprise? I'm asking you to prepare your answer. Then yes. When you ask me properly, whenever that is, the answer will be yes. 1,000 times yes." He kissed her. All the struggles, all the pain, all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep wondering how she'd make it through, it had all been worth it to get here. Hanjail asked Albert first, exactly 1 week later. He took them both to the park, and while Aliyah pretended to read on a bench, he and Albert sat by the pond feeding ducks. "So, Albert, can I ask you something important?" "Okay. You know how I've been spending a lot of time with you and your mom?"
"Yeah."
"I like it. You're fun. And you don't get mad when I need to take breaks or when things are too loud." "I'm glad. Because I like spending time with you too. A lot. And I've been thinking, how would you feel if I was around even more? Like, all the time?" Albert thought about this seriously. "Would you live with us?" "Maybe. Or we could all live somewhere together. A bigger place with room for all your trains and books. Would you be like my dad?" Hanjail's voice was gentle. "I would like to be. But only if you're okay with that. I know you had a different dad before." "I didn't really have a dad. He left before I even got to know him." Albert shrugged. "But you're here. You come to my school stuff and help with homework and remember things I like. That seems like dad stuff. It is dad stuff. Hanjail paused. So, would it be okay if I asked your mom to marry me? If we became an official family? Albert was quiet for a long moment. Then, would I have to call you Dad? You can call me whatever feels right. Mr. Gibm, Hanjail. Dad, it's up to you. I think I'd like to call you Dad. If that's okay. From the bench, Aliyah watched Hanjail pull her son into a hug, both of them holding on tight. She wiped her eyes, her heart so full it might burst. That evening, Hanjail took them to dinner at the same restaurant from their first date. After the meal, while Albert was distracted with dessert, Hanjail got down on one knee next to the table. Aliyah Williams, you changed my life the night I met you. You showed me what it means to be brave, to fight for what matters, to find light even in darkness. You and Albert have become my whole world, and I can't imagine my future without both of you in it. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and Albert's father? Will you build a life with me? He opened a small box, revealing a simple but beautiful ring. Aliyah couldn't speak through her tears. She just nodded, over and over, until finally she choked out, "Yes. God, yes." Albert looked up from his cake. Did she say yes? She said yes. Hanjail confirmed, slipping the ring onto Aliyah's finger.
Cool.
Does this mean we're family now? We were already a family, Aliyah managed. This just makes it official. Can I tell my friends? They're going to be so excited. You can tell whoever you want, buddy. That night, after Albert was asleep, Aliyah and Hanjail stood on her balcony, looking out at the city. His arms were around her waist, her back pressed against his chest. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Of what? That I'll wake up and this will all be a dream. That something will happen to take it away. That I don't deserve this much happiness. He turned her around, cupped her face in his hands. You deserve everything good this world has to offer. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it. The business changes, the new house, the family we're building, all of it. I promise. I believe you. Good. Because I keep my promises. They stood there in the snow, two people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd chosen love despite the complications, who'd built something real and lasting from broken pieces. And when Aliyah looked up at the man who'd changed everything, she knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning. The best was yet to come. 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony with just close friends and family. Albert was the ring bearer, proud in his little suit. Dr. Osei was there, smiling. Mrs. Rivera cried through the whole thing. And when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the whole room erupted in cheers. Hanjail kissed her softly, then picked up Albert and spun him around, making him shriek with laughter. We did it, Aliyah whispered later, watching her husband and son play together at the reception. We're just getting started, Hanjail corrected, pulling her close. This is just the beginning of our story. And he was right.
It was.
3 years into their marriage, life had settled into something Aliyah never thought she'd have. Comfortable, steady, happy. Hanjail had successfully transitioned most of his businesses into legitimate ventures. They'd moved into a house in the suburbs with a big backyard where Albert could play. He was 11 now, thriving in school, making friends, talking about wanting to be an engineer someday. Everything was perfect, which is exactly when the letter arrived. Aliyah found it in their mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon, mixed in with bills and grocery store flyers. Official-looking envelope, return address from a law firm in California she'd never heard of. She almost threw it away, assuming it was junk mail, but something made her open it. The words didn't make sense at first. She had to read them 3 times before they clicked into place. Estate of Josephine Marie Williams, notification of inheritance. Her grandmother, her mother's mother, who Aliyah had met exactly twice in her entire life. The woman who disowned her daughter for marrying a black man, who'd refused to acknowledge Aliyah's existence, who her mother had stopped mentioning after a while because it hurt too much. That grandmother had died. And apparently, she'd left Aliyah everything. Everything turned out to be a house in Santa Barbara, several investment accounts, and a trust fund worth just over $2 million. Aliyah stood in the kitchen holding the letter, her hands shaking, when Hanjail came home from work. "Hey, I picked up those." He stopped when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" She handed him the letter without speaking. He read it carefully, his expression shifting from concern to confusion to something she couldn't quite name. "Your grandmother. I didn't even know she knew I existed. Did you know she was sick? I didn't know anything about her. Mama stopped talking about her when I was little. Said it was easier to pretend she didn't have a mother than to keep getting rejected by her." Aliyah sank into a chair. Why would she leave me anything? She spent my whole life pretending I wasn't real. Hanjail pulled up a chair next to her, took her hands. "I don't know, but there's a lawyer's number here. Maybe we should call, get some answers?" The lawyer, a man named Robert Fisher, was sympathetic but professional. "Mrs. Gibm, your grandmother spent the last 5 years of her life with Alzheimer's. As her condition progressed, she started talking about regrets. Your mother was mentioned often. She seemed to remember things differently than how they'd actually happened. Or maybe she just finally saw them clearly. So this is guilt money," Aliyah said flatly. "I think it's more complicated than that. She left you letters. Several of them. They're with the estate documents. Maybe reading them will help you understand." The letters arrived a week later. 10 of them, written in shaky handwriting that got progressively worse. Aliyah read them alone in her home office, Hanjail respecting her need for privacy, but staying close in case she needed him. The first few letters were stilted, formal. Apologies that felt hollow, explanations that felt like excuses. But the later ones, written as her grandmother's mind slipped further away, were different. "I see your mother in my dreams. She's young again, laughing, asking me to love her baby girl. I said such terrible things. I chose pride over family. I chose what people would think over my own daughter's happiness. And for what? To die alone in a house full of things but empty of love. I tried to find you once, about 10 years ago. Hired someone to track you down. They told me you were working 3 jobs, raising a son alone, barely surviving. And I did nothing. I told myself you were managing, that you didn't need me, that it was too late to fix things. But it wasn't too late. I was just too much of a coward. I'm leaving you everything, because it's all I have left to give. It won't make up for the years I stole from you, from your mother, from myself. But maybe it can give you choices. Maybe it can make your life easier. Maybe it's the one good thing I can do before I forget who I am completely." Aliyah cried reading that letter. Not gentle tears, but big, gasping sobs that she tried to muffle with her hand. Hanjail must have heard because he appeared in the doorway, didn't say anything, just pulled her into his arms and held her while she broke apart. She was sorry. Aliyah managed eventually. She was actually sorry. "I know, but it doesn't change anything. She still chose to stay away. She still let my mama die thinking her own mother hated her. She still—" "I know," Hanjail said again, stroking her hair. "You're allowed to feel all of it. The anger, the grief, the what-ifs. All of it. I don't know what to do. You don't have to decide anything right now.
Take your time.
Process it. We'll figure it out together." But processing it turned out to be harder than expected, because the inheritance brought questions Aliyah hadn't anticipated. Like whether to tell Albert about his great-grandmother who'd rejected his family but left them wealth. Like whether to keep the house in Santa Barbara or sell it. Like what to do with money she'd never asked for and didn't feel like she deserved. "It's not about deserving," Hanjail pointed out one evening. They were sitting in their backyard, watching Albert practice soccer drills. "She left it to you because you're her granddaughter. That's it. What you do with it is your choice." I keep thinking about Mama. How she struggled her whole life. How she died exhausted and broke. And now there's all this money that could have helped her, could have given her even one easy year, and it just sat there. Because her own mother was too proud or too stubborn or too something to help. "You're angry." "I'm furious." Aliyah stood, pacing. "I'm angry at my grandmother for being a coward. I'm angry at myself for caring what some woman I never knew thought of me. I'm angry that Mama's not here to see this, to finally be proven that she mattered, that her life mattered, that the family she built was worth something. Hanjail let her rage, didn't try to calm her down or offer empty platitudes. He'd learned over the years that sometimes Aliyah just needed to feel things fully before she could move forward. I want to do something meaningful with it, she said finally, sinking back into her chair. Not just stick it in a bank account. Something that would have made Mama proud. Like what? I don't know yet. But something that helps people like us. Single parents, families struggling, kids who need support. Something that makes a difference. Over the next few months, with Hanjail's help and connections, Aliyah started a foundation. The Josephine Williams Foundation, named after both her grandmother and her mother, because maybe the best revenge was turning pain into purpose. The foundation provided grants to single parents for childcare, therapy for children with special needs, emergency funds for families facing eviction. It was everything Aliyah had needed when she was drowning, everything she wished had existed when her mother was alive. But launching the foundation meant going public in ways Aliyah hadn't expected. Local news picked up the story. Cleaning woman turned philanthropist uses inheritance to help struggling families. Which meant interviews, which meant people asking questions, which meant attention she absolutely did not want. Including attention from people who'd known her grandmother. The woman showed up at their house on a Saturday morning. Older, white, expensive clothes and careful makeup. She introduced herself as Margaret Sutherland, one of Josephine's longtime friends. I heard about the foundation, Margaret said, perched uncomfortably on their living room couch. Josephine would be. Well, I think she'd be proud. You knew my grandmother well? Aliyah asked carefully. We were friends for 40 years. I watched her make a lot of mistakes. The biggest one was cutting off your mother. Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. I told her she was wrong. Many times. But Josephine was stubborn, doesn't even cover it. Once she'd taken a position, admitting she was wrong felt impossible to her. So, she just let my mother suffer.
Yes.
And she suffered too in her own way. She used to talk about your mother sometimes late at night after too much wine. Wondered where she was, if she was happy, if she had children. But she could never quite bring herself to actually do anything about it. Why are you telling me this? Margaret met her eyes directly. Because you deserve to know that she didn't hate you or your mother. She was just broken in ways she couldn't fix. And because I think you should know that in her last clear moments, before the Alzheimer's took too much, she asked me to find you if anything happened to her. To make sure you got the letters. To tell you she was sorry. Aliyah felt something crack in her chest. She could have just called me herself. She was afraid you'd hang up. Or worse, that you'd answer, and she wouldn't know what to say. Margaret stood. I'm not asking you to forgive her. But maybe understanding that she was human, flawed, and scared and full of regrets, maybe that helped somehow. After Margaret left, Aliyah sat in the quiet living room for a long time. Hanjail found her there an hour later, still processing. You okay? I think so. Maybe. I don't know. She looked up at him. Is it wrong that part of me wishes she'd just reached out? Just once? That she'd been brave enough to apologize while she was still alive?
No.
That's not wrong at all. But she wasn't brave. And now she's gone. And all I have are letters and money and questions I'll never get answers to. Hanjail sat next to her, pulled her close. You also have the chance to turn her mistakes into something good. The foundation, the families you're helping, that's her legacy now. Not the years of silence or the rejection. This. What you're building. You really think Mama would be proud? I think your mother would be amazed by you. By everything you've accomplished, everything you've survived, the family you've built. This foundation is just more proof of how incredible you are. Aliyah leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I want to visit the house. In Santa Barbara. See where she lived. Maybe it'll help me understand. Then we'll go. All three of us. Make a trip out of it. They went the following month during Albert's spring break. The house was beautiful, Mediterranean style. ocean views, probably worth several $1,000,000. But walking through it, seeing her grandmother's things still in place, Aliyah mostly felt sad. This woman had lived in this beautiful house, surrounded by expensive things, and died alone. No family, no real connection, nothing but regrets and what-ifs. "Mama?" Albert tugged on her hand. "Why are you crying?" "Just thinking about how important family is, baby. How we should never take each other for granted." "We won't," Albert said with the certainty of childhood. "We're a good family. Dad says so all the time." Hanjail appeared behind them, wrapped his arms around both of them. The best family. Standing there in her grandmother's empty house, Aliyah realized something. Her grandmother's greatest gift wasn't the money or the property. It was the reminder that love, messy, complicated, imperfect love, was worth fighting for. Worth choosing over pride or fear, or what other people thought. "I want to sell the house," she decided. "Put the money into the foundation. Help more families. That feels right." "Whatever you want," Hanjail agreed. They flew home the next day, and Aliyah started the process of selling the Santa Barbara property. The foundation expanded, helping hundreds of families in their first year alone. Aliyah started speaking at events, sharing her story, encouraging other single parents who were struggling. And slowly, the anger at her grandmother faded into something softer. Not quite forgiveness, but understanding maybe. Acceptance that some people carried pain they couldn't overcome, made choices they couldn't take back, lived lives full of regrets they couldn't escape. But Aliyah didn't have to live that way. She had Hanjail and Albert, and a life built on choices that brought joy instead of regret. She had family, chosen and cherished and present. One evening, several months after the foundation launched, she pulled out her grandmother's last letter and read it again. The shaky handwriting, the raw honesty, the belated apology. And this time, when she finished reading, she whispered, "I forgive you." Maybe her grandmother couldn't hear her, but Aliyah needed to say it anyway. Needed to let go of the anger so it didn't poison the beautiful life she'd built. Hanjail found her later, the letter still in her hands. "You okay?"
Yeah.
"I really am." She looked up at him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For being patient with me through all of this. For not trying to fix it or tell me how to feel. For just being here. Always." He pulled her close. "That's what family does. We show up. We stay. We choose each other. Every single day." And that, Aliyah thought, was the real inheritance. Not money or property, but the knowledge that she'd broken the cycle. That her family, the one she'd built with Hanjail, the one that included Albert and chosen friends and people who loved each other despite everything, that family would never know the kind of loneliness her grandmother had died with. They'd chosen connection over pride, love over fear, each other over everything else. And in the end, that made all the difference. So, my darlings, sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, right? Sometimes you take a chance on someone who seems all wrong on paper, but turns out to be exactly right where it matters. And maybe that's what love is. Choosing each other despite the complications, building something beautiful from broken pieces, finding your light in the darkness. Thanks for staying with Aliyah, Hanjail, and Albert's journey. If their story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button because there's so many more stories like this coming your way.